In today's gospel reading, Jesus yet again gives us a model to follow. He's first a model of prayer. He begins by praying for himself, asking the Father to give glory to the Son, so that the Son may glorify the Father. Jesus' prayer isn't about what he can get from the Father, but rather it's ultimately how Jesus can glorify God. Jesus then prays for those around him, those whom the Father gave him, his disciples. They came from a variety of backgrounds. They were fishermen, a zealot, a tax collector. Yet we hear in our first reading that they devoted themselves with one accord to prayer. Despite their different backgrounds, prayer unites them. They are following Christ's example because they know that prayer, that a conversation with God, will continue to draw them closer to God. Jesus is also a model of action. He's telling us that he's already glorified God by doing his Father's work, by revealing God's name to those whom God gave him. Jesus also revealed God's message. In the gospel reading today, Jesus tells us, "The disciples know everything, because the words you gave to me, I have given to them." So Jesus has done what the Father has asked him to do, but he wants to glorify God even further. Jesus is a model of love. Everything is set in motion, but Jesus is still looking for ways to further show his love for the Father. Jesus also shows his love for those around him by saying, "I pray for them." He reveals just how close he feels to his followers, saying, "I have been glorified in them." Back when my daughter was in high school, she had a band concert. During this concert, she had a very complicated solo part that she had kept a secret from me. She wanted to surprise me with it during the concert. The warmth, the love, the pride that I felt the moment she stood to play is what I envision Jesus feeling for each of us when we do his will, when we follow his teaching. Jesus tells us that eternal life is that we should know the Father, the only true God, as well as know the one that God sent, Jesus Christ. The gospel reading doesn't say that Jesus will give us eternal life, but that he may give eternal life. It isn't that Jesus doesn't want to give this to us. It's a tremendous gift, but it's a gift that requires action on our part. In order for us to receive eternal life, we have to accept the gift that Jesus is trying to give to us. We have to acknowledge Jesus as the Son of the one true God. Now, I'm a cradle Catholic. When I was younger, I attended Mass, although not necessarily every week, went through religious education classes, learned somewhat about our Catholic faith, heard that Jesus loved us, but the message never really got past my brain. It was more book knowledge. As an adult, I attended Mass more regularly, mainly trying to set a good example for my two daughters, but also trying to maintain appearances because I knew that attending Mass was something that a Catholic was supposed to do. When my oldest daughter was preparing for her confirmation, I agreed to be one of the catechists for her class, which gave me another opportunity to learn more about our Catholic faith. But it still just seemed to be that book knowledge. It was a year or two after this that I attended a retreat weekend, and that weekend changed my life. I knew of God. I knew of Jesus and of his teaching. I knew that he loved us. But during that weekend, I truly felt his love for me. I experienced God's love in a real, tangible way. It became personal. Once that happened, once God's love moved from my head into my heart, there's no way that I could go back to the way I was before. But we have to be careful. Knowledge and love of God does not mean that everything is going to be perfect. We still live in a crazy and messed up world. Jesus acknowledges this in today's gospel reading when he says, I pray for them. I do not pray for the world. We are in the world, but because of our knowledge and love of God, we are not of the world. Suffering in this world will still happen. Our reading from the first letter of St. Peter tells us this. St. Peter makes a distinction between two kinds of suffering. One that we bring upon ourselves due to our bad actions, by being a thief or an evildoer. And Peter tells us that these actions and the resulting suffering need to be avoided. The other kind of suffering is because of our belief in Jesus. And Peter tells us that this suffering, this kind of insult, should cause us to rejoice, because when we experience it, we know that we're doing the Father's will. Back when I was in Illinois, I worked for a company whose CEO was an evangelical Christian, but who was adamant that unless you believed exactly as he did, you were wrong. And then he would publicly chastise you for it. He tended to surround himself with people that thought exactly as he did, except for me and one other Catholic. During a management meeting, he lamented Catholics and their beads. I pulled my rosary from my pocket, showed it to him, and asked if that's what he was talking about. I stated that praying the rosary was a devotion to Mary, the Mother of God. I said that I believe Mary is in heaven with Jesus and feel that asking a mother to speak to her son on our behalf made a lot of sense. This wasn't the only confrontation I had with this individual. There were quite a few. Each time, I attempted to speak to why I believed as I did. Not as an attempt to convert him or as an attempt to change his mind, but to help him to better understand me and possibly better understand other Catholics. And I think this is one example of what St. Peter might be talking about in today's reading. Before I had that retreat experience, I probably would have been too embarrassed to speak up, too afraid of what the consequences might be to speak up. But once my faith became personal, it's as if I am unable to not speak up. And this is my prayer for you today, that your faith becomes personal, that you allow it to fill you to the point where it overflows into every aspect of your lives. And remember the words from our reading from 1 Peter. Whoever is made to suffer as a Christian should not be ashamed, but glorify God because of the name.
My dear brothers and sisters, let us invoke the mercy of our